you're going to file your taxes and you're probably going to get a return of $30,000. What's
Mm.
the best investment vehicle for us to look at for you to then take that $30,000 and maybe increase it, right, to 60, 80,
Mm.
XYZ down the line?
If you want to drive that, if you want to be successful. Welcome to VIPAs, the game plan call.
You guys are new here. This is our weekly call, game plan call. So today we're going to be going over a few things. But if you guys are new to the channel, just make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, and then we'll get right into it. So this week we got Mustafa joining us. He's I met him a couple months ago. We met like last year, right?
About so, yeah.
Yeah. We met at a wedding. So no, this was about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, because I was in a different line of work at the time. And he was kind of, he had been introduced to me from a different friend, and he was telling me the ins and outs of like what his experience was in wealth management. So I know a big thing that most agents, want, when they come into this business is clarity when it comes to managing their own finances, especially with like lead costs, business costs, things like that. So hopefully, you give us a little bit more clarity on that today.
Yeah, would love to. Just first off, thanks for having me. Yeah, I've been really fortunate to kind of see you get into this industry and kind of follow you and the success you've had. And, it was really awesome to come in here a little bit early, just looking at the numbers. You have a great team. Everyone's here is kicking some ass. And, I think I always just want to say thank you to all of you. I've been in your shoes. Like what we do in this industry is hard. It's extremely hard. It takes a toll on you. So kudos to everyone and all the success everyone's been having. So good job.
Sir. So Mustafa, so you sold over $1.5 million and you were the youngest agent at the agency that you were with. And then
Correct.
you've also consulted and like helped build agencies that have sold for or that are selling for over like $2 million a year in production, right?
Correct.
That's
Yep.
huge, man. So like tell me this, man. Tell me a little bit about like, your experience in the insurance space and then like what got you into like wealth management from there.
Yeah, would love to. So I started my career working as a teller at a retail bank. That was really my first introduction to, finance. It was something I really just took a passion to. I also love talking to people, so I kind of combined those two, right? Finance and talking to people. And I got into the insurance space. I worked for Country Financial. I was a captive agent there. That's where I was about eight. I was about 19 or so. Was the youngest agent there. It was tough, right? I mean, I was basically building an agency all by myself. I sold property, casualty, life, health, annuities. I sold dog insurance. I sold any type of insurance you could probably think of. I sold it. It was a grind. I learned a ton. I continued in that industry for about another few years. After that, I kind of made the switch over to wealth management, where I was doing more planning for, higher net individuals. Then I also started doing consulting for smaller agencies who wanted to grow.
Huge, man. Huge. So how long were you said so you got in the business at 19. And I know we have a lot of young folks here too right now. Right. We have people who are 19 as well, 18, even as young as 18, right, who are getting into the business. Right. So you said so from what time and how old are you now?
28.
28 now. So how many years were you in the insurance space before you got in like wealth management?
6 years.
6 years. Huge, man. Gosh, man. So like what got you like so I'm curious, like why wealth management though? Because I mean, obviously you were still managing people's finances in some regard. You were helping out families. Now you're doing something that's relatively in the same line of work, but it's a little bit different. But what's the biggest difference in like, what you're doing now and the insurance space as a whole? And like what got you to like transition?
Yeah, I think for me, I really enjoyed the planning side of insurance more, right? So sitting down with, a family, right, discussing, hey, I want to get married, I want to have kids, I want to have a dog, and this is the life we want to build. For me, I find that really interesting, right? So being able to sit down with them, really understanding every important thing they want to do in their life, and then planning a plan for them going forward. That's where
Mm,
I kind of felt the most success and what I wanted to do more.
gotcha. I can imagine the clientele though is like completely different compared to
Yeah,
like,
complete 180. Yeah.
yeah. So now you're dealing with much bigger. What like kind of clients do you deal with? Just like give people a little bit of idea, because like we deal with families, right? Like mom, family, husband, wife. mother, father, right? So like now, I mean, obviously it's still the same concept, but like now you're dealing with people who are like who have built like corporations, right? Like, are you comfortable like talking about like some of like the clients that you have? Are you allowed to? I don't know if you have like.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, typically, my clients are, their average household income is between 500,000 to 1 million plus.
Mhm.
Typically these people are kind of a mix of, they're either, a C-suite employee, right? So they work for a big Fortune 100 to 500 company in the executive side. Or the other aspect of it, right, is they're typically entrepreneurs, right? So they've kind of built a business, they find success, but now they're looking, okay, I've had this success, but how do I now grow this success, right? How do I
Mhm.
grow my money and make sure that my kids and my kids' kids have that funds for them available?
Dude, that's. I mean, it's relatively the same thing, right? I would say because like most of the time people are getting, life insurance policies and things like that. They're obviously looking for quote unquote generational wealth and things of that nature. I mean, are you still like getting them enrolled into life insurance policies, teaching them
Yeah,
the importance of those things? Okay.
yeah. And I would say, like, even though, um, right, that number, you look at it, right, like, oh my God, $1 million person, the
Right.
framework for them is all typically the same.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna get into that here in a minute.
Yeah.
Um, but my biggest thing, I think the first question I think everyone has like, when you were at a captive agency, it's like were leads provided to you or like were
I bought
you having
leads.
to
Yeah.
gotcha. Talk a little bit about that, man. Like how are you sort of, generating leads first of all? And then like what strategy, most importantly, right? Because this is what everyone wants to know. Like what strategies did like you have in place being in the industry for like 6 years to like use to budget effectively for being able to even generate those leads in the first place?
Yeah, would love to. So the first thing kind of remember is when we think about budgeting, right? It's really easy just to think, okay, I'm going to take 20% every month and park it for leads. And it really doesn't work that way, right? You want to budget for your leads. It's going to really variable. It's going to be a variable amount, right? Some days, some months you're going to spend more. Some days, some months you're going to spend less. A typical framework I'll say is if you are newer to the industry, you would want to put at least 40% of your budget in leads. This is just because you're new. You want to get ahead of people. You want to kind of almost, I call them target practice, right? Even they're not the best leads, it's allowing you to be on the phones, kind of practice. So I would say, yeah, typically your first year, about 40% every month should be accrued for leads.
Mm,
As your tenure increases, I typically see the number decrease to about 30 to 20%. Again, right, kind of a generic framework there. When we think about, okay, I bought these leads, right, but how do I make sure that I'm actually effectively using them? So the first thing I like to always recommend is in this industry, it takes roughly around 7 to 8 touch points. So touch points include email, phone calls, or text message, right? So maybe for the month of January, if you look back at
you
all
guys are
the leads
doing
you bought,
email. Hold on, sorry, I'm gonna cut you off. You guys are
yeah,
doing email too?
I used to do email, correct?
Wow. Okay. So what kind of email? Yeah, continue with what you're saying, but I want to know like what kind of emails are you saying? Because we don't really do a lot of email marketing whatsoever when it
Yeah.
comes to talking about leads. But
So the reason I mean, again, I also did this back when I don't think, texting was such a big thing. You have to remember, right? Everyone in this industry is now using text messages and phone calls, right? Very few people use emails, but you'd be surprised. People open up their emails. Like if you think about it, right? How many times if you have an iPhone that, you get a new mail, or a notification pops up, you get that probably a few times during a day. And you
right,
probably are more likely to open it versus a text message because you know it's coming from a random number.
right. Yeah, that's true. That is true. I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna
Yeah,
be
and typically like these emails I used to send out, there were nothing about like, hey, like come buy some life insurance. It was, hey, here's what's happening in the world. Here's what's happening in industry, right? Rates are going up. Maybe you should lock in your rates today before they do go up, right? So it's more of just generic, just marketing, like, hey, here's what's going on in
mm-hmm.
the world.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, because I'm trying to. So I think I'm a pretty visual learner myself, man. I think it kind of help other people. So like, just walk me through that. So you got in the business, 19 years old. Okay, you're talking about 40% should be put in back into the business, right?
Right. Yeah.
When did you like? Were you living? What was your, like at home like living situation? Were you living with your
Yeah,
parents?
so I was living at home, which was kind of
Okay.
nicer. Again, right, I know that seems like a lot, right? Like 40% seems a lot every month. But remember, right, when you're new, you really just want to get in front of people, right? Doesn't matter if they tell you yes or no. You just want to have essentially that target practice, right? So that's why I like to recommend try to just buy as many leads as you can, get in front of people as fast as you can.
Hmm. Okay. So like what was like your average, like let's just say in a month, what were you averaging, let's just say at your peak, what were you averaging like in income on a monthly basis? And then sort of like strongman that for us, sort of like break that down. It's like, okay, what expenses would go, let's say you made 10K in a month, right? What expenses would go towards leads? What were your overhead expenses looking like at that time?
Yeah.
Things like
So I
that.
think the first thing kind of look at, right, is just look at your personal budget first, right? So figure out, hey, how much is rent? How much do I need for groceries? Kind of do your own personal finance and be like, okay, in order for me to maybe, get what I need, right? Not so much, don't worry about the wants, right? I want to go out to a movie. I want to buy a new shirt. Don't worry about that. But it's, hey, here's what I need to survive. And maybe it's 5K. Okay.
Mhm.
So I know every month I'm going to allocate 5K to my personal budget.
Mhm.
That leaves me 5 grand in total for the agency, right? So that 5 grand, I would typically recommend starting out, try to put at least 40% of that into leads.
Okay. And that's the strategy that you use yourself, like getting into.
Right. Yeah. So for me, like the first 2 years, I paid myself very little. Like I
Mhm.
put as much as I could back into the business.
Yeah. There you go. That's everything. You're hitting all the right notes because this is something that we talk about all the time. It's like, especially with the newer agents that are coming into the industry, it's like, you know, and unfortunately, right, if you have LinkedIn, I know you already got me at LinkedIn, but if you guys have LinkedIn, hit me on LinkedIn because I'm about to drop this post tomorrow. It talks just about this that you're talking about right now. Um, you know, unfortunately in this industry right now, it's like the dot-com boom, early back in like 2000s, right? And with the boom and then also the bust in a sense too, because when the boom happened, right, all these startups had got a lot of like venture capital funding, and then those same startups, they didn't really know what to do at the end, so then the bust happened a little bit later, right, a couple years later. But in the insurance space, what's happening right now in the past 4 years is we've seen like e-applications have made it easier than ever to be able to, protect a family, right? And then with that being said, also getting paid much faster too, right? And that's where the boom is happening, right? Everyone's like gravitating towards the space. And you see a lot of these younger cats, right? Myself included, but I try not to, move the same way, come in the business, they're posting a lot of the flashy, the watches, the cars, the lifestyle, all this stuff, right? The lifestyle inflation. That's what we do. The steak dinners and the calculators and all that. Yeah. So this is super important, man. Super important. Like, the fact that you said you kept your overhead costs low, especially coming in here. Cause a lot of people, like, they miss, they miss that, right? They miss that there's costs associated with this business. Otherwise you just become dependent on it, right? This is a business where you have the opportunity to become independent, right? In the beginning, you have to be a little bit dependent, but your dependence will be, a result. Your independence will be a result of, the way that you're living, right? In terms of being able to manage your costs and things like that. So that's huge, man. And it's tough to
Yeah.
do. It's really tough to do that, but
And I agree. And I think, I'm not trying to sit here and say like be a monk, right? Like
Mhm.
live in a closet and don't have a life outside of it. Like I am human. Like trust me, there's been months where I used to just blow a commission check and I'm like, what did I just do? Right. The best way to kind of think about this for yourself, right, is think about it as a savings fund, right? Maybe it's just starting off again. Start off with your personal budget, figure out how much do you need to still have the lifestyle that you want, or a little bit less, which is totally fine. And then maybe it's just, hey, I'm gonna put $100, in the savings account for, my business, right? And as you kind of, go over your budgets, ideally every 6 months to a year, maybe start adding a little bit more to that savings account. Um, that's a great way to kind of start, I would recommend too.
huge piece, absolutely, man. Just keeping them overhead costs low, man. Something that we try to preach to the best of our ability. I think most of us do a pretty good job with that, but it's easy, right? Like when you don't really have like the craziest overhead costs, and you're living with your parents too, right? And we're living rent free. You're just seeing all this money come in, to sort of get carried away and like, yeah, I got like 5, 10K. I'm writing up a deal. Every time I write a deal, it comes in my bank account. I'm gonna spend money on nothing. So I'm gonna go hit the Louis store real quick. I'm gonna hit the Gucci store real quick.
Yep,
That's not good for scale, personal scale at
absolutely.
least. Right? But let me ask you this. So like, in your experience, now I want to touch a little bit about what we talked about, like in terms of how you talk to these, higher net worth clients, but and then branding and things like that too. What would you say like the biggest mistake that you see new agents make when trying to scale their businesses within the space?
Yeah, so I think the big
Oh,
kind of
what else have you also heard? What have you heard from the people that you consult with too about their agencies?
Yeah, so I think the big common theme here is just inefficiency, right? So there's a lot of agencies that are just stuck in a rut and they can't seem to get out, right? So for example, right, I've talked to agencies, right, where they may have five, six different agents, but those agents are only spending an hour or two of their day on the phones, right? They're
Mm,
preoccupied with follow-ups or doing something that's not even important, right? So like one piece of advice I have for you, right, is maybe for a week, from the time you get up, right, write down everything that you've done in a day, right? And then take a step back and look at it and be like, okay, what did I do today that I can maybe use? AI is huge, right? Like, what can I use AI to just automate this? Or am I really spending the most amount of my time efficiently doing this? Right? Because at the end of the day, right, we make money when we're on the phones. So you
mhm,
want to make sure at least an 8 hour day that you're spending at least half of your day, 4 hours on the phones talking to clients.
mhm.
So yeah, just figuring out what efficiencies you're having in your day to day and just looking at a game plan, kind of fix those would be huge.
No doubt. No doubt. I mean, it's another big one, man. And this is coming from a wealth manager too, folks. Like this is not, some sort of gimmick. This is what you're hearing from people who are doing 2 million a year in production. So this is like definitely, verified advice. And it's huge, man. Like, we always tell people like in the morning, like I said earlier, it's a business you become independent eventually, right? Do the work first, get paid, protect the families, make sure you're doing it ethically correctly, right? That has to be there. And then, go if you hit your numbers by the first 2 weeks of the month, take the last 2 weeks and go, it's a beautiful thing. Go to a central time zone country, book a flight, and go and lock in out there, right? You can still call out there, you can still have a good time out there, but do the work first, right? And do it efficiently, like you said. It's like we always say, like, as we know, this business does not work around our schedule.
Right.
It's around the client schedule. So like what they leave for work in the morning, we got to dial in the morning, right? 8:30 to 1. Cool. Unless we got an agency call, right? Like we do right now. And even then you can still dial a little bit. But then we take a 4 hour break in between, right? That's our schedule, at least. Like we take a 4 hour break in between. We do our, sort of underwriting, sort of talking to carriers, talking to clients, making sure that claims need to be filed, claims are filed. And then back on the phones from 4 to 8 p.m. because why? People are coming back from work. So huge piece, man. Huge piece. Um,
Yeah. And the other thing, two pieces, when you have really good months, right? It's really just making sure you sit down, you figure out, hey, what did I do in this month that maybe that was a result of me having a good month, right? Was it because I maybe dialed 100 extra people, right? Or it's, hey, like I used this pitch and it worked out really well, right? So it's learning from your really successful months. What did you did right? And on the flip side too, it's when you had a really bad month, right? Again, it's easy to just be like, forget it. I've had a really rough week. I don't want to deal with it. I'll try again next week. But it's going back and drilling down into your process, right? Of, okay, why did this week not work out for me? Was it maybe because I made less phone calls, or was it the time that I'm calling people in, or was it what I'm saying on the phone isn't right, right? So being able to just go back, right, figure out what went right, what went wrong, and kind of adjusting those pieces is super helpful as well, looking at efficiencies.
yeah, man. No doubt. You're hitting all the right notes, man. But now my question is this though. So like moving on, we're really trying to figure out like so when you're talking to your higher like net worth clients, right? How are you talking to them about like life insurance as a whole? Like how do you like integrate like tax efficient investment strategies with insurance solutions to maximize like your clients' wealth and things like that?
Yeah, great question. So just looking at life insurance, right? So most people that come into wealth management, they come into it thinking, okay, like you're going to manage my money for me. You're going to make me rich, right? So it's taking that and saying, yes, we're going to help you obviously with your budget, try to make sure that you have a comfortable lifestyle going forward. But we're also here to make sure that your kids, right, have that fortune, right? Make sure that if they want to go to college, they're taken care of, right? They can have the same lifestyle that you have, right? So again, right, it's using insurance to realize, hey, it's not so much about you anymore, but it's about the legacy and the family that you're going to be leaving behind for futures and generations ahead.
Mm. Have you ever like had to file a claim or anything like that in your time?
Yeah. Yeah, I've had to file a few claims.
Mm. Okay. if you can just to give people a little bit more clarity, like walk us through like a time like when you had that, like how you generated that lead for. Oh, I mean, you probably get leads now, right? So you're
Yeah,
at a firm, so they probably obviously it's different. So
right.
you have a book of business, right? How you approach that book of business or how they approached you, right? The conversations that led up, how long were they a client of yours, and then just a success story as a whole. That'd be kind of good just for people like understand.
Yeah, would love to. So it was actually I had inherited this client, but they had bought insurance through another agent about like 20 years ago. I inherited his book of business. Ironically, I was actually working with his goddaughter on getting her insurance.
Mm,
And it was I knew the family, right? And the way I approached it was like, hey, uh, your family member trusted one of our agents, right, to be in control of his future, right? So I came in with just an empathetic, just I am human. I want to help you as much as, your grandpa had help, right? So just making sure I opened up that relationship first, right? I wasn't coming in like, hey, I'm going to sell you some more stuff, right? Because now, I'm going to get paid on it, right? It's more of, hey, let me help protect you the way, your grandpa did. And I remember so like we went, we got her insurance, she was all good to go. Yeah, and about I would say 8 months later, her grandpa actually ended up passing away, uh, which I handled that claim. I typically, again, right, this was a captive agent, so it's a smaller book, so we were allowed to do this. But I went, I made sure I got the flowers. I sent over a note, right, again because trying to be human, right? It's not so much about like, hey, it's my job to do this, but it's I want to make sure that I'm looking out for you, not just from an agent, right? Just not from a salesperson standpoint, but as a friend and a human standpoint.
mm-hmm. No doubt. Look, I wasn't really. That's a huge. That's good for us to know. So I mean, that's something that we most of the time we're doing a lot of the times too. We have a lot of interesting stories. I was like more so like referring like within like wealth management, like you have like success stories like within you being at your firm, things like that. Where, where you've had to sort of leverage. Do you ever like leverage life insurance to with your higher intel clients to be able to like talk to them about the cash value elements and things like that. Do you ever like having any case studies of people being able to like leverage that to be able to like maybe build businesses or do whatever else they need to do? Maybe had
Yeah,
like
so I do have this one client, and he actually brought over a life insurance. He had a smaller policy. Um, we had converted over, but essentially it was a whole life that he had used to then send his kids off to college with. He was able to put out some cash value of that to pull out to
hmm,
college. But like that's something we always build out with our clients if they don't have life insurance is highlighting the fact that like, okay, you do have two kids, right? One's 5, one's 8. Would you like them to go to college? Ideally, yes. Okay. Well, and then kind of talking about how you can then, use that life insurance to essentially pay for that college fund.
hmm, gotcha. Okay, so that's how you're explaining it to them most of the time. Gotcha. What is like walk me through a day in the life too. So you're is life insurance like a majority of the I can imagine life insurance probably isn't the majority of the conversation that you're having when it comes to talking to the clients that you talk to, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's a smaller part. It's still important, but it's a smaller part of the portfolio. And typically when we get to the life insurance stage, I've already been talking to these clients for, a few months, right? So we've already built out the relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
really life insurance is just checking off the box, making sure that it is part of their portfolio for them. And
Okay.
also just making sure they understand the need of why we're putting it in there for them.
Hmm. Okay. It's like talk to me about like what exactly is wealth management? I think a lot of people are trying to understand like what is wealth management as a whole. Like,
Yeah. So essentially, we just manage your wealth, right? So it's whether it's you have, and I think that's another misconception, right? People think you need to be a really, really wealthy person for wealth management.
mm-hmm.
Wealth management goes down to someone who makes, 5K a year all the way up to, 5 billion, right? It's essentially we take a look, right? We take a financial snapshot of your income, right? Of all the money you have, all the debt, and we look for a way to manage that for you from a tax perspective, from a debt perspective, and then from an income perspective.
Okay. And what kind of strategies are you guys like implementing in that regard to sort of like I'm sort of trying to like paint the picture like what exactly is like the day-to-day workload looking like? What exactly is it being done? It's like similar like consulting. In consulting, people say I'm a consultant, right? And like when you watch they make these memes about consulting on social media because all consultants do is they just find like
words to sort of put together to make it sound like it's something crazy when it's, they're not really doing anything like that all too crazy.
Yeah.
They're just common people, right? So like I'm just trying to get understand like what's the actual like workload look like for someone who's in wealth management.
Yeah. So right now, typically because it is tax season, right? So we're working with CPAs, any tax auditors, right? Making sure that taxes are done for our clients. But then it's realizing, okay, you're going to file your taxes and you're probably going to get a return of $30,000. What's
Mm.
the best investment vehicle for us to look at for you to then take that $30,000 and maybe increase it, right, to 60, 80, XYZ
Mm.
down the line. So right now, timeline wise, we're just looking at tax returns and kind of looking at what we can do with those tax refunds. Or if they do have to pay taxes, it's where we're going to pull out those tax money from.
Mm. Gotcha. Okay. Cool. So then you're like what? So look at investments like what real estate. What else do you guys like typically do you look at?
Yeah, so real estate's considered alternative investments, but yeah, it's typically real estate, private equity, right? So it's maybe buying into a business, right? Going to
Mm.
become, investor in a smaller business or a larger business. The stock market as a whole is typically there. Um, if they don't have, again, life insurance is set up, we'll try to pull some money into there. And then just typical like savings accounts as well. But most of the time, it is diversified in different investment vehicles.
You guys do anything with annuities?
Here and there, we don't do a ton of like I personally don't do a ton of annuities. The reason is, my clients are typically like their money is usually held up somewhere else, so it's really hard to kind of pull for annuities. But I did used to sell annuities. I mean, I think it's a great vehicle. If you can really find the right client for it and they understand the value, I mean, it's great.
No doubt. Yeah, I was gonna. I know we have a few people here who are, obviously in like, very heavy when it comes to, selling annuities, and then obviously people who are looking to get into selling them too, which is huge. But what would you say is like the biggest misconception about like wealth management that typically prevents people from securing proper insurance coverage as a whole?
Yeah, I think it's the idea again, right? That you need to be this really affluent and rich person
Mm.
and be wealth
Mm.
management when reality is everyone needs wealth management, right? It's just the level of what you're doing with it just depends, right? So don't feel like if someone gets on the phone with you and says like, "Ah, I don't need insurance. I barely make 20 bucks a month." So you're still making money, right?
Mm.
Like everyone needs wealth management, just depending on how you go about it.
No doubt. No doubt. So now, with that being said, I know it's kind of going to like the second piece here. I know originally you want to talk a little bit about branding, right? So like, when you were at Country Financial, and you were saying that, you built a lot of your business off of like your internal network, right?
Right.
People coming in the business, right? The reason why we have our setup the way we do is because we don't really, push a lot when it comes to, even when it comes to referrals. I feel like, we're slacking on referrals. We're slacking on, following up with our book of business. Cause like most of the time people just buy, when it leaves, right? Um, and another thing is that internal network, right? People come to our organization because we're, super big on like, you don't have to call some of our competitors out there. They built their businesses off of calling their family and friends, right? Like make a list of 200 people that you know and then call. So we kind of like try to stray away from that. And I know that's something that, when you got into, the business, something that, you were doing, but it's a good way, I feel like, for people to be able to build their initial book of business like from their internal network. Cause most of that, sometimes here we have like lead assist programs, right? And with those lead assist programs, what it does is that it sort of like it's good for someone to get on their feet. But then at some point, people get crippled to the lead assist program. They're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get my leads paid for, I'm gonna be good. But they don't realize how much money they're really losing with that.
Right.
Right. They're losing a lot. It's like it's a pretty big split, right? And when it's like your own internal network, I mean, you're coming in the business, well, you make 100% of that. No one's gonna ask you to split that. That's those people that you know, right?
Right.
So, and that being said, like when you're in your line of work, go ahead. Are you saying no? I was saying, so what would you suggest is like the step-by-step process for someone who's like trying to leverage the internal network, and how did you do it?
Yeah, great question. So I think the first thing to remember, right, is before we even look at referrals and trying to get more business, right, is making sure, hey, am I being the best agent I can be? What does that mean? That means, am I writing the cleanest, right, most ethical business, right? Am I I'm not just calling people and treating them like a salesperson. I'm actually being human towards them, right? When you give people really, really great service, when you ask for that referral, it becomes so much more easier. Versus when you, let's just say you call somebody, you call them 100 times, right? And every time it's the same thing. Hey, Mr. Mrs., do you want to buy life insurance? You want to buy, they're not gonna want to do business with you because they know all you care about is just making a quick buck, right?
Mhm.
So it's when you sit down with clients, talk to them, have a conversation, right? Like make sure you write down things that they like, right? Maybe they like the Bears. Next time you call them, oh, sorry about the Bears loss, right? Being able to be human and build a relationship, that's going to really help build out referrals. Because once you do close that sale, they're going to realize, wow, working with Mustafa was really great. When you ask
Mhm.
them, hey, I had a great time, helping you out and kind of building out your future. Is there anybody else that you could maybe think of that could be worth protecting their family for?
Mhm.
Right? So using that framework, right? But again, it all comes down to just making sure first you are doing your job first and you are damn good at it and you're being human.
Yeah.
The other side, and that's really just personal referrals, right? And also just make sure you ask it at the end of every sale. The reason
How do you
why
ask? How do you
most
ask?
people don't get referrals is because they don't ask.
Okay.
And the
Okay.
worst thing someone is going to tell you is no. Oh, totally fine. Just like it was great helping you, right? You still be polite, you be cordial, and you hang up. You're done, right? But you should always make sure you ask. The other side of referrals, right, is looking at other people in the industry. So one thing that was big for me, right, was connecting with loan officers. Again, the same framework applies, right? If you know somebody that you went to school with and you see that they're a loan officer now, if you call them and be like, hey, I'm also an insurance guy now, let's do business together, they're probably going to turn you down. Why? Because you haven't given them value, right? Again, you haven't treated them, you haven't given them anything that's going to make them think, oh, I should do business with you, right? So, what I typically recommend is go ahead, look through your personal network and see, do I know any maybe people like a loan officer in my network? Okay, maybe I don't. Do I know anybody that I know that knows somebody, right?
Mhm.
So it's, hey, I don't know one personally, but I know Ayaan has a guy who's a loan officer. All right, I'm gonna cook with Ayaan, right? I'm gonna see what this guy's deal is. The second thing I'd like to then piece together is go and do research on that person. You better be liking their Facebook page, their Instagram posts. Like you should see what are they doing and maybe what are they struggling with, right? Maybe they're having a slow month too, right? And they're reaching out. And sometimes it's simple as calling them up, like, hey, I have a referral for you. Can you help this person out? Or it's, hey,
Yeah.
can you help me out? Right? You're giving them something in return. You're giving them something without nothing in return. Right?
Mhm.
Once you kind of built that relationship a little bit more, they're going to be softened up. They're going to be like, you know what? I actually want to do business with you because you are successful and you do treat people really well. And I want my brand to be associated with your brand.
Mhm. No doubt. People hate that. People hate that feeling of what they
Honorable people, let's say at least, like people don't like the feeling of feeling owed, right?
Yeah.
Like you do something for me, like you do something for me long enough, like even you showing up at this call right now, I'm like, okay, cool. Like I gotta really like help this guy out in some regard. Like subconsciously, I'm not this isn't the first thing that I'm thinking of, but like you call my phone, like, hey man, like, yeah, you can hop on my call, maybe for sure. I know I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna hate that feeling, right? Not everyone's like that, right? But no, it's definitely a big piece. Like, would you say that you built most of your business like just using that kind of approach? Then you said you were buying leads. Like, what kind of leads were you buying? Were you running Facebook ads? What were you doing?
Yeah, I was typically buying like insurance specific leads. So there's the
Yeah,
ones that like
where,
had
where, like, would you like have like a specific like source that you were buying the
Mm,
ads?
I don't remember their names, but yeah, I mean, nothing fancy. I mean, they were pretty cheap leads. Again, right? I was just trying to buy as many as I could. But it got to a point, right, where I was like, I'm spending so much money on these leads, and it's either one, I'm not fully using them, right? Because I call them a few times and they never pick up, so I just don't even bother with it, or they just never led to anything, right? So that's what kind of forced me to be like, okay, at work, how the heck do I then
Mhm.
tap into that? And
Mhm.
that's where I think came up with
Okay.
that
The loan
framework.
officer framework.
Yep, loan officer.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, I would say, find people that are typically somewhat in the life insurance space,
Hmm.
kind of connect with them as well. right? Loan officers are pretty big just because, people buy homes, right? You get that mortgage-backed life insurance. Great kind of intro to that.
Mortgage protection. That's our bread and butter, man.
Yeah.
That's what sets us apart from like most people, right? And the thing is, it's unfortunate to say, but like just being real, most of the time when it comes to mortgage protection, is what we call it, that's the business going to stick on the books because if someone can qualify to buy a home, most of the time they have the financial stability to be able to, afford life insurance as a whole. Right? We try to make it as affordable as possible, right? That's the biggest thing that separates us from most people is our access to the carrier relationships that we have. So like I said, that's what we're able to do to find affordability for most people because you have someone that has some severe health conditions, right? And one insurance company is telling them they've called like all these different insurance companies, everyone's giving them different quotes or declining them or whatever it may be. They come to us, we do all the shopping around for them, and in like 20, 30 minutes, we already have the most cost-effective solution in the entire nation, right?
Yeah.
But mortgage protection is like it's our bread and butter here because like obviously it's a business that sticks, and people need this stuff, man. They
Yeah.
lose.
And to kind of add to that, right, is in your heads, right, you should be typically thinking if someone buys a home, it's typically because they want to settle down, right? They either have a family, they're looking to get into a family, right? Maybe they're just newly married, they bought a house. It's really important on those conversations to ask them, hey, congrats on the house. So happy to help protect this for you. Have you thought about kids or, what does the future look like for you? Right. This then opens you up because now you go from that mortgage backed insurance, right? That's your bread and butter into now carrying into conversation about kids and how to afford for kids, how to afford for their college or the life that they want, or something happened to you. What lifestyle do you want for your kids? So just piggybacking off that is huge.
Yeah, emotional buying, right?
Yep.
People don't buy based off what you say, but it's about how you make them feel.
Correct.
Biggest piece.
Yeah,
Huge
but it's
piece.
just important to kind of recognize that, right? Of like, why do people buy homes, right? What mindset are people in when they do buy those homes?
We actually have a few. We actually have this. There's a real estate agent here within our organization who's crushing, right? And she was able. She actually. So funny enough, she actually came from the real estate space.
Hmm.
Um, she was like top producer selling homes, things like that. But with real estate, the problem is that it's a lot of work. It's a lot of field work, and the pay takes a long time. Like you can go and show someone like 5, 10 homes, take hours out of your day. And then after that, they might just say, yeah, I'm not even, looking to buy a home. Or let's just say they are looking to buy a home, that could take a long while. Now they sit down and have the conversation about buying that specific home. Let's say that they can't get approved for the home. Now that deal's out the door, all these hours wasted. Now
Yeah.
they get to the process of getting approved for the home. Let's say best case scenario. Now they have to wait 30 days, 30 to 60 days for the realtor, the broker to even get, compensated. Right. So this girl, she came in an organization and, she was leveraging life insurance, selling her real estate clients mortgage protection. Right. And it's like she built most of her book of business. And then what she was doing is she was working real estate part-time.
Yeah.
And then she was doing insurance part-time as well. And then she realized that she just made the full transition pretty recently too into the insurance space because she was like tired of just waiting that much longer to, get paid. And, obviously people, there's much more need for like what we do rather than, real estate as a whole, especially right now when it comes to the economy and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
huge
Yeah.
piece, man.
You had a great point.
Yeah, man. So now you talk about, obviously with loan officers, like I'm really curious because this is a big thing. There's obviously family and friends, right? Like, and did you have like people within, like you said, your internal network, of course. Like, what were you doing, like, structure that deal with them? What was that conversation like with the loan officers as a whole? Like, were these people that you already knew, or these people just like you just approached on LinkedIn maybe, and then one led after the next, and then at some point you said that your costs also earlier you said this, you said your costs for leads also decreased. Was that
Correct.
like attributed because of the fact that you started reaching out to your internal network?
100%.
Okay. Okay. Let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about that. I want to know how did that happen? Right. Because
Yeah.
like,
So it was kind of like what I was saying earlier, right? It was like I took a step back. I realized I'm spending all this money on leads, right? That are either I'm not fully, going after these leads and pursuing them, or they just weren't that good leads, right? Where I could make a sale out of them. right? So that's where the conversation of pivoting into my, internal network became a thing. I would say I did start off because I did know a few loan officers, but then I would ask them for referrals, right? Like,
Mm,
hey, who else do you know in the space? Or, one thing I used to do once in a while, like every quarter, was I would hold kind of like a happy hour, right? So I would bring in as many loan officers in the area, right, into like a Dave and Buster's or something, and just be like, hey, here's, I just want to talk about insurance for an hour, right? There's free drinks, there's free food. And they love that, right? It was a great networking experience for them. It was a great thing for me. And I was able to get a ton of leads through that as well.
that's genius. That is genius. Like a boiler room. We
Yeah.
got.
Or and yeah, honestly, like even a simpler version of that, right, is just hopping and just, take a drive one day and just figure out, where are loan officers in your city, right? Just stopping I with donuts or coffee, like, hey, just want to introduce myself. I sell life insurance, XYZ. Let me know if we can be of any assistance. Just leave your
Mhm,
card and go.
mhm,
Typically, I mean, that was always cheaper than like buying a ton of leads as well. So it kind of just worked out.
mhm. I'm trying to like paint that picture. So, like, let me ask you this though, because like we're a very data-driven organization, as I've said many times by now, right? So let's just say, on average, okay, you say you have there's a branch, right? A loan officer branch. How many brokers would be like within the average like branch as a whole? Because I'm gonna try and calculate some.
Yeah, like the smaller shops, I'd see like 2 to 3. The
Okay.
bigger ones, you'd see like 4 to 6.
How
Just
many loans would you say they're processing on a monthly basis? Like, would you know?
I mean, at that time, they're probably doing at least what, 40 loans. I
40
mean,
loans a month
yeah, yeah,
on a month. Okay. So 40 loans a month, just to paint this picture for the rest of you guys. Okay. 40 loans a month. Let's just say each loan is 40 houses. Let's just dumb it down. 40 houses. Okay. Each house has a husband and a wife. Okay. So that's 40. So 40 times two, let's just say so that's 80, right? So 80, let's just think of it as 80 people. Right. The average life insurance policy in terms of AP, right, goes for like $83 a month. So that's 1,000 AP. So you do 80 times 1,000, that's $80,000 in production. Right. And that, I mean, like that's best case scenario, right? If you were able to build that kind of relationship. Um, but that's insane. It's insane to consider. You pick up one of those, man, you're good. You
yeah.
know?
Now you imagine, you have a few of those.
Yeah.
The other
There's,
thing too, I think that's also important to talk about with referrals, right? And working with lenders and other people in the industry is making sure that you don't drop the ball on service,
hmm,
right? Because I've seen it happen, right? Where you could be working with a loan officer, they say, hey, we need this done by, this date. If you don't get it by that date, your relationship is over, right? So really making sure that, right? Because it seems like the hard part is getting a hold of somebody. Truly, that's the easiest part, right? The
hmm,
hard part is maintaining that relationship and making sure that, you are providing that value that you did promise them in the beginning.
hmm, no doubt. Talk about referrals, man. So I know you had mentioned that earlier. Like, how are you? What was like your script? Like, what were you saying to people? Like, sort of get referrals from folks.
Yeah, again, it kind of talks about you've already done the hard part, right? You've already given them really great service, right? So at the end of the close, it's, hey, Mr. Mrs., I really appreciate the time you kind of spent with me today. Is there anybody else that you think that could be helped?
Hmm.
And just be quiet. Don't ask any more questions. Just be quiet and let them think, right? Because it's typically going to be like, uh, I don't, nothing on top of my head. I can let you know. That's great. Let me shoot you an email with and if you want to reply back with a few people and their phone number, let me know. Or, hey, totally get it. Let's just check in maybe 3 months from now, right? And see if you know anybody there, right? You never want to give them the out of, I don't know anybody. I'll let you know later.
Hmm.
What does later mean, right? It's making sure, okay, tell me later. I'll shoot you an email or a text message and you can tell me about it later.
Hmm. No doubt, man. The fortune is in the follow up, man. Fortune is in the follow up.
Yep. Yeah.
You said earlier, you said like 7 to 8 touch points, right? And
Correct.
dropping one. I want to know how many people here are following up with their clients. Like, because a big thing here, right? We buy so many leads, right? Like, people buy one pack, call them like once, twice, and then they're like, okay, cool. I closed one deal, cool, flip it, get the next one, right? So, I'm really curious to know, like within our organization, like how many, I think like the average person is calling their leads like maybe 2 or 3 times before like they call it quits. So
Yeah.
um that's
No,
something
you
that
gotta 8 times. 8 times is typically when you will get a hold of somebody.
okay. And did you have like a CRM and stuff like that that was sort of uh reaching out to those folks, or you were doing it all manually?
I was doing it all manually, but the way
Easy.
I would kind of break it down was like I had an Excel sheet of all my leads I'd call from like
Mhm.
8, right? From 8 a.m. to 11, right? So I would call them every other day. If they didn't pick up, I would then switch them to call them between 4 and 6 p.m., right?
Good.
So you're not just doing this, you're not just following up at the same time every single day. You're
Right.
kind of mixing it around. Okay, I called this person 4 times at 8 o'clock in the morning. They never picked up. Let
Mm-hmm.
me try calling them again, but this time at 6 p.m., right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's switching what you're doing. You're not just beating essentially that horse over and over again.
Mm. Yeah, man, that's another big piece, man. Definitely need to be doing a better job when it comes to that stuff. We tell the agents this. We say, like, let's just say, I called you, right? I called you, let's just say yesterday morning at 11 a.m. You picked up the phone, right? You scheduled an appointment for today at 11 a.m., but you missed the appointment. But I already know that every time I call you at 11 a.m., you're gonna answer the phone. So making sure that, when you with missed appointments, huge thing, because that's a touch point, right? That's a touch point, and someone expressed, you kind of went through, you had a little bit of a conversation with someone to schedule that appointment. You already know by the end of the appointment, this is something that they see the value in, something that's important to them, right? So now, even if they miss that appointment, every single time you call them at 11, it's going to be, you're going to get them on the phone at some point,
Right.
right? Throughout that time. Talk a little about, so like in terms of branding, like any like social media, like what were you doing in terms of that? Like what kind of advice would you give like new agents who are like trying to build a brand?
Yeah, I will say, again, this is probably just me personally. I'd never had too much of a social media following. Country Financial, who I was with, they had a marketing team that would just send out like LinkedIn posts. So I would just copy and paste those. But for the new agents, right, I would say, right, it's easy to kind of follow this trend, right? People in the industry where they wear, their Gucci shirts and their watches and they're like life insurance, buy some, right? Maybe it's more of sitting down and doing post about this, the insurance industry, right? How inflation is a really big deal right now and how to kind of maybe negate some of that inflation, right? Or it's talking about, right? You're giving away information, right? You're giving away value to clients without asking for anything in return, right? Because your brand, you want to be a professional who knows this industry inside and out. So when someone does pick up the phone, they want to talk to you, you know exactly how to relate the industry to who they are and what they want to accomplish.
No doubt. No doubt, man. Yeah, I challenge the biggest thing I'm thinking of right now, man, is this loan officer idea, man. I'm imagine if somebody like does like some sort of ad or like I'm waiting for the first person in our organization to actually runs with this thing because that would be huge. That would be huge. And the craziest part about it is that like most like of these agencies, right? Some of our competitors too, all right. I mean, we don't even. I mean, they can't compete what they can't compare. Let's just say that. But they've able to build, scale, and grow their organizations literally just by calling their personal book, literally just by calling their friends and family. So it works. It's there, and people have been able to make a great deal of income by doing just this. I mean, you were a prime example of that. I mean, 1.5 million is not no joke, right? Um, but I mean, that's something, when you're sort of given most of the tools, it's easy to sort of just get like, you know, caught up in what's in front of you, right? Instead of like sort of exploring outside and creating other strategies, right? Because lead flow is cash flow, you know, super important. Let me ask you this though. So like, what do you think could have been done better for you? And what would have like, been driven, what do you think you could have done better that would have driven further success for yourself within the insurance industry? And like, what kind of advice do you have for new agents as a whole?
Yeah, I think the two things were to be just we talked about earlier today, but it's just being more efficient, right? Like I spent a lot of my time, right, in my early years of not actual selling, right? It wasn't until the light bulb went off and I realized, hey, I only get paid when I am on the phone,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I better start getting on the phones a lot more sooner. So I think if I just learned those efficiencies much sooner in my career, I'd have a lot more success. The other part of it too, right, was I would have really bad months, right? And I would really just let myself down, right? I would let those bad months carry me around, right? It's almost like, someone tells you no enough times and it gets in your head, right? So it's, again, shaking your head off. You're like, it's fine. It's part of the game and just moving forward, right?
Mhm.
Again, realizing what I did wrong, learning from those mistakes and moving forward.
Mhm. Yeah, man, that's huge too, especially when you're young too, man. That kind of rejection, either break you or to make you, you
Yeah.
know? And it's like when you get into any new business, right? We talk about this all the time. We talk about ignorance debt, right? Even when you got into wealth management, right? There was probably a period of time when you had to go from like not knowing anything about the space to learning everything about the space.
Yeah.
And the dues that had to be paid in the time for you to have to learn that, right? And then stick it through too, right? Because there's probably times like, man, I don't even want to do this no more, right? Am I right or am I wrong? Right?
Absolutely.
Insurance and in that, but that being in the insurance space though, it's like it probably molded you into getting through all that, right?
100%. And here's the thing, people buy from
Mhm.
people that they know their stuff from, right? It's like when
Absolutely.
you go buy a car, you don't go buy a car from the guy that can read the manual. You buy the car from the guy that, knows the car inside and out, right? Knows, what type of engine is in there and where it came from and XYZ because he's an expert. People buy from experts in their field. So you have
Mhm.
to be an expert in your own field.
No doubt, no doubt. I know absolutely. You need to know the ins and outs. Big thing we say here is too, like keep it simple, right? Harold, he says this all the time, right? Because like, we also have like let's just say you got 15 years of knowledge of the insurance space as a whole, right? Of all these products, but you get on a call with a client who knows nothing about it. There's also something as like too much information, right? TMI, right?
Yeah.
So sort of finding that fine balance, between the two. But other than that, man, I think that you touched on some huge points, man. Huge points. I feel like I learned a great deal. I'm gonna really start pushing, everybody else to sort of start targeting these referrals and things. That's like missing. I feel like that's the missing piece,
Yeah,
here.
it's
Um,
definitely huge. And no, I appreciate you. Thanks for letting me come on. I don't know what time this ends, probably at the top of the hour. I know we have 3 minutes. I'm happy to answer any questions too.
yeah,
Anyone
yeah,
in the chats, happy to do that for you as well, since I'm
yeah,
here.
man. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, we'll take some questions here in the next couple of minutes. But no further ado, man. Mustafa, thank you so much for joining us today, man. Seriously, this is going to be huge. This is going to blow up. Now I want to give other people the opportunity to be able to ask any questions they may have. But if this is something that you guys found value from, please like, comment, subscribe, hit us on YouTube. And then we'll see you guys next week for our last call of the week, last call of the month, and then we'll go from there. But I appreciate you guys, man. Come on.
Take care.